Hello everyone, you're watching Ukraine Breaking News. My name is Maria Kahal and today we're talking to a retired US Army officer and former commander of the US Army in Europe, Ben Hodges. Hello, Ben.
Hello, thanks for having me.
First of all, I wanted to ask you, how do you feel about the new United States president that recently inaugurated?
Well, of course, I was not happy with the outcome of the election, but he was elected, and so now he is the president. So there's no denying that. I was not encouraged by what I heard yesterday during the inauguration, even though it was a peaceful transition of power, which is an important part of our democracy. Several things that he said during his speech and immediately afterwards give me concern about our democracy and about how he intends to go forward.
And about Ukraine, especially, Trump has obviously realized that he cannot stop the war in Ukraine within 24 hours. How likely is it that the war, at least its hot phase, will stop this year?
Well, I think this depends on Ukraine and Russia more than it does on the United States. I'm going to sound a little bit hopeful here. First, Mr. Trump comes into office with a lot more leverage over Putin than he had 4 years ago or 8 years ago. I mean, Russia is in trouble. Their economy is in trouble. The Russian military has failed to accomplish any of its objectives, and they did not have the ability to save their ally Bashar al-Assad in Syria. So these are all indicators of Russian weakness. Meanwhile, Mr. Trump comes into office. He's at the peak of his political power. He will inherit the strongest economy in the world, the U.S. economy, and he has dozens of allies that want to help Ukraine, but they need American leadership. So he has leverage. Plus, he could leave in place without having to do anything some Biden policies that were implemented very late, admittedly, but nonetheless, they were implemented, talking about sanctions against Russian shadow fleet boats carrying oil to India and China, lifting of restrictions on Ukrainian use of ATACMS inside Russia. And I think there are more than $2 billion worth of aid that were already approved, but have not yet been delivered. Mr. Trump could tell Putin he's going to allow these things to keep going if he does not negotiate. So there is the possibility of some good things to happen, but he didn't say anything yesterday clearly in the inauguration, and I wished he had.
And talking about Biden presidency, in general, how would you assess the pace and level of assistance provided to Ukraine during his presidency? And Trump says that Biden could have prevented the war. So maybe I agree that Biden did really good things for Ukraine, but maybe what could he done differently or more? For example, not withdraw the embassy or provide weapons in advance, or maybe come to Kiev and say something like really loud and clear? Was it real to prevent the war in Ukraine?
Well, of course, as you know, the war started 11 years ago in 2014. So Mr. Trump was in office during 4 years of this war. So this is a classic attempt by him to deflect blame for him not solving it or stopping it when he was in office. But yes, Mr. Biden could have done much more. The most important thing Mr. Biden could have done as president was to declare that we wanted Ukraine to win, that it was our policy that Ukraine should defeat Russia because it's in our strategic interest, that this was not charity to Ukraine, but this was in our interest. And he could have provided all kinds of aid as well as used the economic tools much earlier. That would have made a huge difference. So President Biden is a good man. He wanted to avoid nuclear war. Unfortunately, he failed to do the most important thing, which was to clearly identify America's strategic objective and do what should have been done to help Ukraine defeat Russia. We've missed a chance to help fix European security for decades by not helping Ukraine defeat Russia. So we'll see what happens in the coming months. And I think my slight optimism is based on Mr. Trump no longer seeing Putin as this savvy genius, but instead sees him as a loser. And perhaps there'll be less willingness to fawn over President Putin.
There is an opinion that Ukraine were given just enough help not to lose, but not enough to win. Do you agree with that?
That's exactly right.
Not only from the United States, but from Europe and other allies also.
Yeah, Germany, UK, France, other countries could have and should have done much more. Now, some countries, like Estonia and some other Eastern European countries, gave everything they had. But the big ones could have done much more, including Germany, which was the second largest contributor. But that was not the standard. The standard should have been, what do you need for Ukraine to win? But, they were all really looking to the United States to provide that leadership. And I think the U.S. probably discouraged some countries from doing more, both directly as well as by our own failure to do more.
And we've all also seen that controversial statements of Trump. I don't know if that was serious thing or not, about Panama Canal, Greenland and Canada, and how likely is it a conflict between United States and Canada, United States and Denmark over Greenland and Panama over the Panama Canal can be the trigger for conflict? And what was it? Because does Trump really believe that he can make America greater, literally, or what?
I take him serious that when he talks about expanding American territory, I mean, this is like something from the 19th century, and it's bizarre, not something you would expect to hear from an American president, but I take it serious. These are all unnecessary provocations. Greenland, which is was given the right by Denmark to self-rule, still is governed by Denmark in terms of foreign policy and defense policy. The Danes and Greenland have allowed the United States to have a base in Greenland since the Second World War. So we're already there. The Danes and Greenland would welcome U.S. investment, expansion of the military. I mean, so this was an unnecessary provocation against a NATO ally, Denmark. I think it's extremely unlikely that something will happen, but the fact that you and I are even talking about this is a gift to the Kremlin. With Panama, not a NATO ally, but nonetheless, this has been a country with which we've been friendly for decades. And, my research is that the United States pays no more to use the canal than does any other country's ships. Yes, there is a Hong Kong company, a Chinese company that operates parts of the canal, but it's not controlled by the Chinese or with Chinese soldiers there. Still, this is a vulnerability that exists in much of our transportation infrastructure where Chinese companies control the ports or parts of the ports, to include here in Germany, in Hamburg, for example. So this is something that's a legitimate concern about Chinese influence. But, the claims by Mr. Trump about why we should be able to take Panama Canal, I think is, seems to me to be in violation of numerous international law. And this will be a test. This will be a test for the new Secretary of Defense whenever he is confirmed, and for the officers in the military leadership. If they are told that this is what's going to happen, will they pass the test of not obeying an illegal order? So I think This is going to be a problem. And then the threats against Canada, it's bizarre. Yes, Canada should be paying a lot more for their defense. They benefit from being our neighbor. And a country with so much wealth should be doing much better on their own defense. But, it's also it's one of our biggest trading partners, and I think there's other ways to do things.
Yeah, but saying such things kind of reminds me of Russia when Russia says something controversial about like invading other countries and no one reacts to this like it's normal thing, and it's kind of similar to that, no?
It is exactly similar to that, and that's the problem. In a normal time, no American president would say outrageous things like this because it undermines the international rules-based order. And it makes it very difficult for the United States now to criticize China or Russia for what they're doing. And the Chinese and the Russians and others will say, look, we've just gotten a green light from the White House, basically, to do what the hell we want. And so this is much more significant than the Panama Canal. This is about the international rules-based order that we all depend on, and from which the United States has benefited more than anybody.
And also Trump said that it's because of him, Israel and Hamas signed a ceasefire agreement. What do you think about it? And what do you think about Trump policy towards Israel, Hamas, and Hezbollah and this region?
Well, I think Trump supporters will believe that it was only because of him that this happened. So, this is not something you can argue back. The fact is, I grew up believing what Henry Ford said, that there's no end to the good a man can do if he does not care who gets the credit. But this reveals the character and the narcissistic approach to life of Donald Trump.